So you want to start by cutting a bunch of greens, and you want them to be somewhere around 7 inches in length. You want to cut a bunch of different kinds. I used fir, holly, and pine. And then you want to take a piece of rope longer than the length that you want it to be, so doorway or edge of your house, whatever, and you want to tie knots about every foot down that and go all the way down the rope. Double tie them to make sure they're nice thick knots. And so you want to take one of the knots and either tie it around a chair, or I'm just jamming it in between a piece of firewood here to hold it in place. Take some wreath wire and then take a bunch of your greens. And you want to take the wreath wire and wrap them around the greens, and then you'll wrap the wire around itself to anchor it to the greens. So just twist it around itself a few times, and then you can just take the paddle and wrap it around both the greens and the rope. And then do that a few times. Make sure it's good and secure, and then you'll add another bunch of greens. In this case, I'm switching to holly. And so then you just wrap the wire around that again. And you'll have some of the stems from the previous greens behind them as well. So you just keep wrapping right around them. You want to make sure all the stems are covered. So when you add a new bunch of greens, you cover the previous stems, and you wrap those a few times, going all the way down the rope. I also used a little bit of white pine for that wispy look, but I didn't use as much of that because it's not as strong as like the fir and the holly, so I used that a little more sparingly, but it does give it extra texture. And again, just wrapping them all the way down. The different textures is what makes the garland look pretty. So here's what it looks like so far. You can see all the different textures here. And then you just want to keep doing that all the way down the rope until you have it as long as you need it to be. So here you can see I'm measuring it with my tape measure. So when you get it as long as you need it to be, tie a knot in the end and cut off the rope, and then take some greens and put them on the rope on the opposite direction and wind the wire around it. And then you'll take some more greens and put them in. You're just trying to kind of fill in that hole in between them. So you'll end up having to put them in from both directions. So like this stack I'm putting in from the other direction. And you wind the wire right around that. And then the last batch I put in to cover the hole. And then I kind of threaded the wire through all the greens on the end so it didn't leave a big depression in the greens. And once I had that wrapped around there, cut off the end. And then you just want to wind that end, just kind of weave it through some of the other wire wrappings that are around there. Make sure it's fastened good and secure. So just wind that around there a few times. And so here's the greenery part of the garland. And then I'm going to add the pine cones in a minute here, but you can see the different textures what really make it look good. So to do the pine cones, take a piece of wreath wire, and then you just want to wrap that wire around the pine cones. I like to do it twice to make it secure. Then you wind, kind of spin the pine cone so that the wire winds around itself. You can always ask your cat for help. That's why I have a big scratch down my hand, because the cat nailed me while I was doing this. So do a bunch of those, and again, always have cat supervision because you need cat supervision to do this. So take those pine cones and the little tails that are hanging off the wire there. You're just going to thread those through the garland until you can reach them on the back side. So you want to leave the tails pretty long when you're winding the pine cones. And then you just twist them on the back side. And you'll put one of those about every 1.5 feet. You can do more if you want to, but it does get tedious if you have a long garland. So I did about every 1.5 feet. And so here's the entire garland. I also sprayed it with wilt proof to preserve it, and that's why the greens are all shiny here. And so then here's what it looked like after I hung it around the doorway of the local coffee shop.